Good afternoon again, everyone. I'm Brady Ferguson, Director of Public Engagement with the Climate Solutions Accelerator of the Genesee Finger Lakes region. Thank you for joining our webinar today on understanding climate emotions. Our first presenter today is Dr. Christine M. Stearman, who has been a psychologist for over 40 years, spent years as a disaster responder for the Red Cross, and as a result of seeing the increasing severity of weather-related disasters, switched her volunteer time to climate issues and now is involved in Citizens Climate Lobby, Color Your Community Green, En-ROADS, and local sustainability efforts in Lima. Chris, you can take it away.
Okay, thanks. I was muted for a minute there. Okay, so there aren't very many slides. I'm going to try to do this fairly quickly so people have time to ask questions. And actually, with this slide, Brady already said the stuff. So um, I really started getting involved in disaster responding in the 90s, and then about 10 years ago, I was in at Red Cross National Headquarters deploying people to disasters, and there were five weather-related disasters happening at the same time. And it was impossible. We were trying to train people online. It was a nightmare, and it made me realize that the approach that the US had towards dealing with weather was really unsustainable, and that I was going to move my what volunteer time I have to climate work. And then I found Citizens Climate Lobby and have been, working with them ever since. And really the studies that are out about kids worrying about, and because I'm a therapist, I work with kids and families. If I bring up things like climate or to kids I talk to, I'll ask, so what do you think about it? And most of them, well, the literature says 85% of them are concerned and frustrated, feel like the government is not doing what it ought to do. There's a lot of disregard for the problems, and things were looking good for a while, and now they're not looking so good. So kids that I talk to, they're like kind of avoiding the whole thing, like they're kind of avoiding politics. They're like, there's nothing, I guess we're all going to die. And I hear a lot of kids talking about not having children, that they don't think that they dare do that. Um, I guess it's good that I'm a boomer because I hear a lot of complaints that they blame it all on us boomers. It's like, sorry, but yeah. I mean, we didn't take the wheel like we should have. Um, but I remember stuff happening even in the 60s, like when I first couldn't when I was so hurt when I was first told I couldn't eat snow anymore. That was horrible, right? You can't eat snow, can't drink from the streams. I mean, I went backpacking in Colorado in the 70s, I guess, late 60s, early 70s, and I was drinking from the mountain streams. There's no way you can do that now. It's impossible. So we have been dealing with it for a while, and people could talk about climate back in the 70s and stuff. We were having some trouble with acid rain and all kinds of stuff, but then it became political, and now it's like you're not supposed to talk about it. So I'm glad we finally are. So go to the next slide, Brady. So it's like we really, we don't know what's going to happen with everything that goes on, but here's some ideas of one way of talking about it with kids. I think the most, least for me, it's important to avoid false reassurance or hyperbole. I think kids need to hear the truth, but in developmentally appropriate levels, because now that we have to start teaching about this, what we're going to say to a fifth grader isn't the same thing as what we would say to an 11th grader. So I think we're going to have to be working on how we're going to present this information to not frighten, but to be honest about it. At least what I remember when, like, responding to, say, tornadoes or hurricanes, you reassure the kid about what's going on right this minute, but you can't talk about, like, you're safe forever, whatever. So finding ways of talking about this in a way that gives kids hope without covering up the fact that there are some really significant risks to deal with. One of the things that, because I deal a lot with anxiety in general, anybody who does therapy deals with anxiety a lot. And one of the things that I help people realize if they're saying, if they start a sentence with what if, like what if, what if an asteroid lands on my house kind of a thing, um, that it's important to realize that it hasn't happened. You have to stay in the present. It doesn't mean something can't happen. There's no guarantees about things, but to help people stay in what's going on right now and what can we do with what we know right now, and staying in the present. And these anyway, so these are a lot of suggestions that we will give kids. These things here on here came from climatementalhealth.net if anybody's interested in looking up some of these things. Could you go to the next slide? So this is kind of showing the what happens depending on your level of anxiety or arousal. So what it shows is if you're totally uninterested or unengaged or whatever, that's at one end of the spectrum. But if you freak people out completely, where they think they have no hope and they're all going to die, then you also get inaction, and that's at the other end. So what we're aiming for is the middle part, where people realize that there's an important thing that needs to be dealt with. Um, and but and it's hopeful. There's hope, so that people feel like it's worth taking action, because I think a lot of, at least up until recently, a lot of the information that came out about climate change was just horrific, but it didn't give you answers like, okay, so can I do something about this? What are some actions I can take, whether they're small or large, whether they're local or national. Um, Brady, move to the next one, please. So this talks about how what I was saying before about the three different levels that elementary school students by the end of fourth grade are supposed to have had some training in climate, and I think it really is important to start then, that to at least start with the idea of hope and action. I think that's the main thing, to start with little kids, having them feeling empowered to be involved and getting other people involved and being able to talk about it without being dismissed by other people. And then middle school students are supposed to have learned something by 8, and then of course in high school by age 12. Um, I don't know. I mean, you that are educators would have a better sense for this, but I know, like, when I see kids that learn sex ed in school, it's not taught the same in different grade levels. And I think we need to do the same thing here. That climate is a very complicated climate is a very complicated issue, but we can start with the basics, like, greenhouse gases at the younger ages. And then this one, this page, the emotional resilience process, it's like figuring out, first you have to, letting people or letting kids express their worries or their fears. And so when they hear something dangerous, like, okay, you can say you can talk about it being scary, and then we talk about how we feel about it and what does it mean. And having that be part of the whole process of talking about painful feelings that we have. First, we have to be aware of them. Then we have to process them so that they're not quite so scary. Maybe talk about them with other people, and then allow some positivity to come in, and that's where all those things overlap, is where you can become resilient in dealing with climate, because there is hope. It's just that the way our news cycles go, that you don't often see the hope. You see all the scary stuff. There'll be tornadoes or whatever, and we've had a lot of that lately. And around here, we're having, these bad windstorms and excessive rain, so that planting. So there's a whole lot of things that are happening, and you see that stuff in the news. But what gets missed, what doesn't get discussed in the news, is what people can do about it, and how small actions can lead to bigger actions. Um, and that's going to be our job. working that we work with the kids, whether we're teaching or other ways, or as parents to explain to kids, yeah, that the scary stuff is on the news. Plus, you want to not expose your kids to too much at a time either. So this climate emotional resilience process came from the Climate Mental Health Network. If you want to look that up, although I would have some other pages where I list the resources. You go to the next slide. So this kind of shows the thing I just explained, where the overlap is where you figure out what are we going to do about it? What are some actions that we want to take? And depending on, how big of, your resources, you might take big or small actions. But there's always something that we can do. And we're always learning new things as new products and stuff get developed to avoid using all the plastics and things like that. So Brady, would you go to the next slide? So this shows some resources that are available to you, and I've listed some of them here. And this climate emotions wheel here at the bottom is also available, that you can help kids identify their feelings when they hear different things, or when you talk about different things around climate. So all of these resources are available to help kids identify what their emotions are, and then process through them, so they're not scared of them. I remember when I forget what, I think it was Katrina. I was at a shelter, and we had a whole room that had a bunch of kids there, and they were, playing with toys and things like that. And we had, what was hard for them is the kids would maybe draw really scary pictures about what they had been through. Or one kid, for instance, had blocks, dominoes or blocks, and they would build into a big pile, and then they'd knock them down. And then they'd build it up, and then they'd knock them down. And what that was tornadoes, right? And so helping parents understand not to shut that stuff down, right? To let kids that they're, because like I heard this one mom say something like, "Oh, that's not nice. Why did you do that? That's not nice." So just teaching parents how to respond to this, that this is the way kids work through trauma, is their play, and helping them do that is useful. And you're going to see that stuff um, in shelters, or when kids have just been through something, and that's how children process. And it's not nice or not nice, it's them processing their emotions. Next slide. So here's something that in your school, seeing if you can start some kind of an action club. There's, a lot of schools have them already. If they don't have a club already, you can see which teachers might be interested. It could be art teachers, environmental studies teachers, or anyone else who's concerned about it, who then might be willing to start a club and include the kids. If your town or area has a farmer's market, that can also be a good place to take the kids and learn about that, and see how do you run these markets. And a lot of times there's people there organic and can explain the kinds of things they do. So this is something that you can do. Let me go to the next slide. Here's a bunch of local or books that might be available in your local library. So you can not that these are the sum of them, but these are just some that I looked up that can be useful. So skimming some of those resources for kids is some, and some of them are set up, as books oriented for kids. So these are useful. On the next slide. And then here's some online resources that I've listed that you can, this is going to be recorded, so you don't have to screen copy this. But it's a lot of places you can look at for other kinds of resources for how you might grow something like this in your town. Let's see here. Oh, next slide. Okay, and here's some movies. Most of us know about the Lorax. That's a classic. And then there's a bunch of other movies that can be helpful for kids. And you can check them out in advance to see which age group they're most appropriate for, how much information they have that might be more than the little kids need to know. Um, Next slide. Climate cafes is another thing that it has been a lot been possible. Usually it starts with some kind of a grounding activity, and then there's a conversation, and sometimes there's somebody maybe having a talk to teach people things. They might have, guests come in, or they might have people come in that can talk about local environmental projects. It can be used for however way you want, but it's a way to include kids both on processing their feelings, getting some information, and then getting support, and then planning what things they want to get involved in. So I'm gonna see if this works. Go to the next one. Oh, I don't know if this is gonna work from here. You know what? I don't think this is gonna work from here. Hey, I know.
Yeah, it might
See if you can click on it,
want
Brady.
to try it.
Yeah, that's okay. It is a YouTube of a climate-oriented meditation. It's only like 5 minutes long, and it's very, you can walk kids through it and help, and you can just look it up and have them have a brief, like I said, it's 5 minutes long, and it's very calming. It's a nice way to start a conversation, or it might be a good way to end a meeting too, just for having kids feel a little bit better. And there's only one more slide.
And I'll just mention we can share the link to the meditation in the chat as well.
Oh, yeah, that's good. That's a good idea. And then here, these are just some American Psychological Association resources on climate anxiety and emotions that you can look. And there's another YouTube thing down there. So that's the end of my presentation. It's short and sweet, I hope. And we can open it up for questions.
Thank you, Chris, for getting us started there. See, we already have some messages in the chat here. And as we're moving into our question and answer time, I'm going to get that started by introducing our second expert we have today with us, along with Chris. And I'm just going to open up another window here. So please bear with me. And you'll see her on screen. She's also posted some things in the chat already. That's Dr. Emma Nelson, also with us today to help answer questions that you have and questions that I have that I'll get started with. Dr. Nelson is a clinical psychologist working at the intersection of climate change and mental health. She sees individuals and groups for climate-aware therapy, offers workshops and consultation to organizations, and serves on the executive committee of the Climate Psychology Association of North America. So we have both Dr. Stearman and Dr. Nelson. And as far as questions, if both of you want to answer or take turns or however you want to do it is fine. I'm going to get us started because in addition, in our preparation for this webinar, we were trying to find a way to include the young people in it. And we talked to some students and parents and decided the best way would be for us to gather some information from them ahead of time and share that as part of the Q&A. We ended up doing a survey of 17 young people ages 10 to 19, going to different schools in the area, including people in the Rochester City School District, Fairport, and a few other schools. And here's some of what they said in their survey responses. 16 out of 17 felt angry. 14 of them felt sad about climate change. 14 said the future is frightening. 11 of them said they won't have access to the same opportunities their parents had, and 10 out of 17 said that humanity is doomed. So, to start with a question related to those responses for Chris or Emma or both of you, how can adults have helpful conversations with young people who are having these thoughts and feeling these emotions?
Thanks.
I think you're still muted. Oh, there you go.
I'm good. Do you want to take it first, Chris, or me? What's
No,
it
you go
working?
ahead. You go ahead.
Okay. Thanks for having me all. It's nice to be here with you. I would start answering this question. Why don't we start to answer it in the way that I would hope we are with kids? Let's just go back to what Brady just said for a moment. I have it in front of me. 14 out of 17 kids, when they see a statement that says the future is frightening, say yes. 11 of them say, I'm not going to have the same stuff my parents have, and 10 say humanity is doomed. So just let that land with you for a sec. 10 kids in our community look at that statement and say, yes, humanity is doomed. I would just offer as a start to answering this question, can folks just pop in the chat what that feels like to you to let in? There's not like a right answer here. For me, it feels like I want to throw up and my chest feels tight and feel scared, I think. Yeah, Amber has sad. Brady has worried. Yeah, let's just get a couple more. Yeah, mine too. Yeah. Yeah, and Lon is connecting it with that this just isn't only about climate, that they're responding to these things as an interconnected set of crises. Yes, I think they're aware of that. Yep. Okay, upsetting, depressing, scared about uncertainty. So, our first task as caregivers is to not be dissociated from how upsetting this is for us. And that is a hard task because it's hard to hold our kids when they're upset about something that we are scared about too. So that's the first thing that I would say. Oh, Kelly, thank you for naming. Yeah, can we just get a show of hands for who wants to like step in and fix it all for them? I really have that. Yes, I also have that too. This like frantic, fixie energy. So, misinformed, Curtis, yeah, or correct them, right? We might not always agree with the narrative behind what our kids are feeling. So there's a little bit of anger there, right? You're not thinking of it right. So these are not subtle responses. This is quite intense stuff that's coming up for us as caregivers as we try to hold intensity in our kids. There's a lot more to say about that, and I think we might get into it with our other questions. So maybe I'll leave my answer there first, that the first step is actually being aware of the amount of intensity that's coming up for us. Chris, do you want to offer anything more or keep going from
No,
here?
I think you covered that really nicely. It's allowing children to say really scary things, and not, like I said earlier, is not to give them false reassurance, to just echo that, yeah, I know what you mean, and then helping them figure out what to do about it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a phrase that I like. It's been helpful for me as a parent. It's something like, you might not, you likely will not be able to protect your child from the effects of climate change in their lifetime, or our multiple, the polycrisis, if you prefer that word. Um, you will always be able to protect them from being alone with this. Always. Isolation is the one problem that we can fix with our children. So that there's the work there, right? Not abandoning them and their feelings. There's a question coming in the chat. Brady, do you want us to go there?
Yeah, well, just if I see a few, actually, let's come back to them because I have another one related to the survey I want to ask first. There was another question, and we found that 6 out of the 17, so a smaller number, but still more than 1/3, they said that when they tried to talk about climate change, others have ignored or dismissed them. And we didn't ask specifically if this was adults, if this was their peers, just who it was that they talked to, but it was just that they tried to talk to someone and they were dismissed. So, how can we create better environments in educational settings so that our kids are not being ignored or dismissed by adults or by their peers?
I think a big part of it is some of the people that dismiss maybe are, not believing, it's as difficult as it is. But I think a lot of times it gets dismissed because the parents don't really know what to say. So they just kind of zip right over it and move on to something else that they maybe have an answer to, or they might, just sort of say, tell the kid, well, it's not, it'll be fine. It's not that bad. So I think part of this is going to be helping parents understand it. Um, and that, that's really hard. One thing that I've done a lot is, people talk about, like someone here was talking about how, people were freaked out in the 70s. And certainly I was, well, before that, what I tell people is that it helps to be old in a way because we go through different, ups and downs, right? So, or I'll talk about how like I'll talk about how freaked out I was at acid rain, right? And then I was freaked out at the lead in our cars. And then I was freaked out about not eating snow. And then it was, whatever. And then of course, well, when I was a little kid, Cuban Missile Crisis, right? So I thought we were all going to die from that. And we might have, right? It was pretty bad. Um, so what I'll tell people is it seems like every I don't know, a couple of decades, there's some kind of a scary thing. And and some people get immobilized by the anxiety of dealing with the scary thing. And that's not gonna get us out of it. So what do we need to help people do? Say, all right, figure out what can I do something about? I can't do something about what's going on in the government, but maybe I can do something about locally. Like this year, I've been working on finding perennial vegetables, is like a sustainable thing. Like, okay, so you can maybe have a garden where you're growing the same thing every year. Or it could be other things like picking up, collecting batteries and recycling them, or informing people of ways to reduce plastics. There's all kinds of little things that people can do that we can so they can get into action. And that's kind of where I point people. I'll say, we've been through human race has been through a lot of crises and we're still here. And do we want to make it better or do we want to just go hide and say, all right, what can we do to make it better and help people? It feels better to work together with other people and seeing improvements too.
I'd love to open this one to the group a little bit. Chris is naming a kind of common way of framing this stuff for youth, which is this narrative around worlds have ended before. We've gone through crises before or near misses before. And this brings up all sorts of identity related stuff, right? For white folks or folks of a certain heritage, this might feel more new to be insecure in this way. Whereas if you're talking to a kid whose people have been struggling for generations, right? Think Indigenous kids, right? The world has already ended. The collapse has happened. So identity is really salient in these conversations. People are carrying different narratives. That was a tangent. That wasn't what I was going to bring to the group. So Chris is pointing to this narrative around, we've gone through hard stuff before. It's a thing that happens. Sometimes it will come and go. And we can find agency in that. The question is, are we going to make it better? Are we not? I feel curious for you all as parents and educators, how does that land with kids in your life? Can they unmute,
If
Brady?
any, yeah, I just changed the settings. Anyone should be able to unmute. If you want to unmute and jump in, you can raise your hand or you can just jump in. You can also respond in the chat if you prefer it that way.
Yeah, chat's fine too. I'm just going to leave it open for a second in case someone's sitting on a comment. Does anyone feel like they've tried this with a young person, saying something like that? No. Okay, so this is an interesting thing to notice for us as a group of adults. Oh, Curtis, older adults. Yeah, their perspective is very different. Yeah, maybe I'll build off of that, Curtis. So, one of the things I'm noticing in my practice is that change is really rapid and intense right now. And it's only getting more rapid and intense. So we have this very natural urge as humans to create some kind of story about it that will hold us. And that's one of the stories. One of those stories that can hold us is this one that Chris is offering. It will not hold everybody. It will hold some kids sometimes, and sometimes it will fall flat. It will not hold them. Sometimes they will need something like, you've been born into a time where some things are falling apart. It's very scary. What might it mean to you to live a good life in a time like that? Sometimes they might need a story like, there's a lot happening right now that is really exciting. People are waking up. Whoa, what's it like to be born in a time like that, right? So I think some of the thing that I'm learning as I work more with people is that we need a little narrative flexibility right now. There's a lot of stuff coming up and we're trying our best to metabolize it. And it helps, I think it helps me personally, but it also helps me as a caregiver to be adaptable in the ways that I make meaning with my kid. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks, Emma.
I'm
And
going to give a
Chris.
slight, I agree with that absolutely. And I think another story that I've been playing with a lot more recently is more in the spiritual end, right? Like what do you believe you're here for? What is the most, what is important? What is it, what are your priorities in life? And generally people, well, little kids might have a little more trouble with this, but I think helping them think of like, do you think you're somebody who likes to fix things, likes to work on things, likes to get together with other people and helping people move towards action and with adults it can be more like, what do you think your purpose is here? You know, what are your we have we're facing something big and it's going to need a lot of effort on all of our parts and we need everybody's creativity and is this something you would like to be part of?
Thank you, Chris. There is a question in the chat from a little earlier that I want to mention, and then another one in the chat after that, and then we'll see how many more we can get through. But this first one is from Curtis, and it says, do you think creating space for scholars to just connect with the outdoors or green spaces?
Curtis, just to make sure we're getting your question right, are you asking, do you think it's good to just create space to connect young people with the outdoors? Is that right?
If I may come
Yeah,
off,
yeah.
if okay. I think what, and I'm so proud that Brady started this a few years ago of just creating like awareness of green space, right? So in urban settings, there's not a lot of green space. And so when you bring in those concepts of people who are normally not, doesn't have it available to them, they don't even know it can exist. So the relationship to be able to start is not there. You know, you have indoor plants, right? You have different things that bring the greenery into your home or greenery to your space that you live in. But to really understand how important it is to have a relationship, to be able to go out in your areas, to be able to build a relationship with greenery and to be able to build a relationship with green space provides that opportunity to know that these are the things that are truly affected. And so for me, right, it becomes a very, very popular feeling like, oh yeah, I know what that tree does, and oh, I know what
Mm,
photosynthesis is, right? But the reality of it is, if you fear, if you have grass allergies, you have a whole different relationship with green. So what I'm saying, guys, is
mm.
we have to break down the generational feeling of why does green space matter? Why does it? And if you have that relationship, you'll have more respect for it. You have more opportunities to build and understand that this is really important. Trees and grass is very important. So when you take care of those places and you create more spaces, it gives you more opportunity to realize that the climate that is being projected over the last 10 years, you want to be more aware of why and how it affects you and your community. So that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm getting at. And so, and
You
Christine, so
sound like, I don't know if this is right. You can tell me if I'm off base. You sound like someone talking about healing a relationship, like
yeah,
something has
yeah.
ruptured again.
Yeah. Yeah. And Brady knows my story. I'm from the Bronx. So green space was hard to find. And I just want to make sure, like, when you finally get to a point where you can make a relationship with the green spaces, you appreciate it more. So I'll meet myself.
So
And
Curtis, I
yeah,
actually was interested in what you said about what younger or young adults who have traveled, different perspectives. Would you mind sharing a little bit of that?
Absolutely. My daughter, she's been to Australia, she's been to Turkey, she's been to parts of Africa, and my son, he's been to Germany, he's been to Japan, so for me, and their stories coming back, and then me being able to go and visit Germany myself, you just get a whole different perspective of how the world looks at climate and how the world is affected. And for me, having those conversations with my adult children, and my wife's an educator as well, we have these conversations with our kids and they talk a little bit about their stints there, right? And they understand like why do you have different ways in which take care and why are you so responsible with how you affect the environment, and in Japan and what happens in Japan and how everything is a certain way, right? And it's purposeful. So that's why I wanted to let you know, like they come back and share with us certain things that they've done and what they've experienced. And it's not just for a week, it's been there for like 3 months to a year. And they come back and they realize like, hey, I get it. I understand why they have these conservative places and they have these people, these companies making sure that this is the way you can serve this, you can serve that because, it may not be there, it may not. And so that's what I was talking about, Christine.
Thank you. Brady, I saw somebody earlier asked if there was Climate Cafe in Rochester. I'm pretty far from there. Is there something like that in Rochester? I think there is, right? Or not?
there used to be, I was running them every so often, and now I have moved. I have a one colleague who is also trained to facilitate climate cafes, but to my knowledge, she's not running them right now.
Mm.
But if I hear about it, I will let you all know.
Emma, Chris, anything else you wanted to say to respond to the last one, or should I move on to the next one from the chat?
I do have one piece on it, yeah, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Just one thing I would be aware of when working with people who are younger than us around nature connection is that a lot of feelings come up. So feelings of like repair and coming home and connection and care will emerge as they will for both of us, for both of us, for most of us. And also, people are very likely to experience grief and upset as they reconnect with the natural world. Folks who are coming of age today, right, who are doing something like a forest immersion are also exposed to what's happening to the ash trees, or they're exposed to invasive species. And it's a different experience of coming back into relationship with the natural world. I don't actually think it's a problem. Sometimes I think there can be a little bit of tension around this, but I think it's a nice opening into the reality of being human in this time, which our kids are going to have to grow into eventually. So again, we're coming back to like, what does it mean to actually presence them as they go through that?
You
Yeah,
know,
one
I
of
was
the
think. Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
No, I was think. I do a lot of storytelling in therapy just because it helps get ideas across. And one story I think that maybe is helpful is and I don't know if anybody here that was alive during the Johnson administration. I see one or two people, but Lady Bird Johnson, his wife, she was big on trash. And that's when all the littering stuff really got going. And I remember, like in the 50s, when you go up and down the highways, people use the world as their garbage place, right? So if you went to, say you went to McDonald's and got everybody a bear burger and fries and whatever, and then they're done and they just toss out the window, right? You're driving down the street, they toss it down the window. So if you were on there were all the signs all over the place too, but mostly all over the floor, all over the ground, there was paper and garbage and just trash. And now you drive around and there's none of that, right? And but when I was a kid, it was nothing to just throw whatever out the window. And and that was everywhere. Every street had trash all over it. And now people honk at you if you throw a cigarette butt out, right? So if for kids to see, we should find pictures of that, of what it was like then and how that got cleaned up as an example of how everybody working together on something we could, that was a huge thing that was accomplished. And where everything, the whole litter bug thing, all that went going, that was new then. And well, thank you, Ladybird. But that's a story I like to tell that you can actually make a big impact on stuff like trash.
And if you want another story, I volunteer with Hudson River Sloop Clearwater. And, many of you must know that during the 60s and 70s, if you went anywhere near the Hudson River, you would see sewage floating down the river and paint colors from GM factories and things like that. And the Clearwater, as the flagship environmental organization, cleaned the Hudson River. It was an idea that just took off and was reported everywhere from the Wall Street Journal to the women's knitting journals and things like that. And it galvanized other organizations around the world, the Netherlands, Nordic countries, I think also in Malaysia as well. And the youngsters who work on the boats still take kids onto the Hudson River and teach them the history of how we got it cleaned up.
Thanks for sharing that story, Helen. I also wanted to point out a question you posed in the chat earlier. Even with the serious environmental problems we saw in the 70s, I'm not sure young people felt that despair. What has changed? And in response to that, Lan said, does it feel more irreversible? So, Helen, is there anything you wanted to add to that, or do you just want Emma or Chris to respond?
I don't know. I think the critical thing is uh, going back to what you were saying, Emma and Christine, about empowering youth and enabling them to get together with others who are interested in talking about this, and then helping them understand that there are things that they can do, whether it's little things like going to the farmer's market, but also um, more, contacting their Congress people as well, because having kids in their office, certain, they may listen more to the kids rather than their adults, but enabling them to do something on a local level. And that's Mary Losing and I are going to be working this summer to develop some lessons on climate education to align with Portrait of a Graduate and the new climate education mandate. What can they do? How can we look at New York State phenomena and say, how can we solve these problems in our own community, whether it's thinking about climate resilience on Long Island and sea level rise, or pushing in of the salt front up the Hudson River and issues with drinking water in Poughkeepsie and Kingston. There are some good resources with DEC as well to say, look, here are some issues. Now let's look at what's happening in our communities and start talking about it. Because climate change as a whole global thing is too much to take on. But if you say that the, traffic circle floods several times a year, what are we going to do about it? then that's something that is more manageable, perhaps.
Thanks, Helen.
I can expand on this one a little bit, or if you want to go, Christine, you can.
No, go ahead.
So I just want to reinforce this piece about human-sized actions. This is important for kids to have something, it's important for all of us to have something tangible that that they can touch and see. And there's a tricky piece here that's probably one of the most challenging parts of my work right now. If I have a 21-year-old frontline climate activist client right now, and if you were here listening to this conversation about engagement and action and the possibility of repairing a river or of cleaning up litter, he would say to me something like, that doesn't really solve the super El Nino. That doesn't solve the tipping points. What would you say to me on that? And he doesn't need me to argue with him there. You can even notice what it's like for you in your body when I bring him in. You're like, I'm like sitting there like, fuck, like, what am I gonna say? How do I hold this kid? So there's something really challenging here that I think doesn't require us to abandon this focus on action. Of course, we want to raise engaged humans. I think it just requires us to add another thing. We just have to expand to hold more. And the more I think we're expanding to hold is not anxiety, it's dread. Dread about this is a term from climate psychology called pre-traumatic stress. When you're stressed out about something that actually probably will happen to some extent, you're not quite sure, but your body's responding to it as a threat, and it really feels like something. It's not crazy for it to feel like something. So maybe I'll bring it back to my 21-year-old client. What he needs from me in that moment is actually for me to stop pushing him. He's doing so much already. His whole life is devoted to this already. His whole college career, he's having trouble making friends. He has trouble living a life as a young person because he's so steeped in action. What he needs from me is something like a long silence. And then in my best moments, I say something like, it seems like you're having all the right feelings. And I just shut up for a little bit. It doesn't mean I don't support his activism. You know, I'm not like maybe you should stop acting. I'm just expanding my capacity to be with him. And you can notice how this lands, right? Like this is a touchy piece that I talk about with groups. It sometimes feels really good for someone to say. Sometimes people are like, I don't like this.
Thanks, Emma. There's another question from our survey of the kids that I think relates to that, but also relates to what you were saying, Helen, about planning climate related lessons. We did ask, what do you want your teachers to consider when developing their climate related lessons? And we received a variety of responses. I have 4 quotes I'm going to read from the survey. One person said, be blunt and realistic. Another said, we can handle the facts. To me, it is infinitely better to be realistic about our future, demonstrating the truth in all of its ugliness than to lie to us. Blissful ignorance won't save us, especially when ignorant actions are the same ones that cause the problem. Maybe the thought is we don't want to scare them. It should be scary to some extent. I'm not promoting causing terror amongst students, but again, if we don't fix the situation, we very well may lose our only home. The second was a longer response there. We also had teachers should remember to highlight the positive aspects of the climate movement and place emphasis on the ability to create change in the world while they explain the severity of the climate crisis. And a fourth one, to not only talk about the bad things, but also the things we can do to help and the small actions. So the question I want to take from that is how can we balance being realistic while including positive aspects?
I feel like what I just said is probably pretty much my answer on that, that there's an expansion here to holding both grief and dread and the possibility of building a really meaningful life, affecting positive change. We often ping pong between those. We like one and then we cut off the other and then we flip flop back and forth. So I think the growth for us is in being capable of holding both at the same time. How about you, Chris? Where are you on this?
Well, what I was thinking about is the importance of encouraging more connection, because sometimes the people that are motivated to do things are the people that think they can do the whole thing, or that they need to be able to do the whole thing, whereas really maybe only you can offer this much, but basically survival is really what this is about. And so I want to do what I can for the climate, but I also have to take care of myself. And if one of my things is I'm learning things that other people don't know and I can teach them, I can share it and we can become a community and all do what we can. It doesn't have to all be on me. And I think that that's sometimes where people get stuck is they're like, okay, there's so much that needs to be done and I can only do a fingerprint worth. Um, and have people feeling good about what they can do instead of looking at how, that saying of how do you eat an elephant, one spoonful at a time. It's like that, right? And we all are doing our spoonfuls. And can we feel happy that we've joined together in this? It's about connection and love for each other and the planet.
I love that you brought this in. Thanks for bringing us back here towards the end. Maybe like 70% at least of the folks I see for climate distress, the thing causing them so much distress is loneliness. I'm all by myself with it. And the root of that is individualism. I'm the only one who could hold this. I'm the only one who could fix it. And that's like a cultural thing. And it's part of what has gotten us into this mess to begin
Yep.
with. So to be adults in the room who are capable of gently poking at that, I study with an Indigenous clinical psychologist who often says something like, "You're not late and you're not by yourself. What's with that? Why do you always think you're late and alone?" He's just poking at these assumptions that we carry that really make the burden feel more personal and more heavy.
It's
Thanks,
the
Chris.
American way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Bootstrap it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you. We got a couple more minutes, maybe time for one more questions if anyone has one. Curtis did put in the chat, creating a toolbox experience allows for young scholars to realize that your climate journey will be filled with various emotions, feelings, facts, and misinformation, but your toolbox will be personal. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else have a final question they want to ask before, or comment, any thought to share before we wrap up?
You know what? I really like what Curtis just put there. It makes me think of how people can realize that we each bring our own gifts to the process. We're not all picking up trash on the side of the road, but we might be doing something else.
And I would just note that if you're a grown-up in this conversation and you want more support, you are deserving of that. Please feel free to get in touch with me. I run groups for adults who are talking through this stuff, psychotherapy groups, and I see individual clients. So my practice is in the chat, and I'm here.
That's
Yeah,
great.
thank you, Emma, and Chris. Thank you to both of you, and thank you everyone for making time in your day to join us for this. As a final post in the chat here, we do have a short feedback form. If you are willing to give us some feedback on our webinar today, I will also send this out via email in a follow-up to everyone. So you don't have to do it now. Whenever the time is good for you, you're welcome to do so. And I will be posting this on YouTube once we process the recording. And hopefully those who couldn't make it but are interested will watch it then. Feel free to share with anyone you think may be interested. And thanks again for coming. Everyone have a great day.
Thanks all.